All right, everyone. Thanks for listening into the Rich CELENZA show. WTF are you talking about? So today I kind of want to get into trying to help people or discuss or me talk about when it comes to creating things as far as like writing goes. And I've never truly looked at myself as a writer. I don't know how I kind of fell into this. I think I'll just give you a little backstory on what I ended up doing and how I ended up writing books and films and all this crazy shit. And obviously I wanted to do that, but I kind of fell into it. I was a horrible student growing up. I think I was one of the last in my class. I went to a private Catholic school. And I think I wanted to make movies or I wanted to be a professional athlete. Obviously, I never grew. I was a pretty good athlete, but obviously, I just didn't grow. I was really small in high school. I was like 138 pounds, 5'6". I was pretty good at tennis, which was funny. I was really good at wrestling. I played all different sports. I was just really strong for my size, though. But and I think I wanted to make movies. This is back in the mid 80s, so I didn't even know you could go to film school or any of these things. I was in the middle of Chicago. Even though downtown they had Columbia. But I just thought they were, truthfully, I didn't know at this point in time, but eventually I did go down there many years later, and they just looked like, in my opinion back then, like a bunch of freaks, crazy people. Because the way I was programmed, I wasn't open-minded enough. But I used to like first writing some skits later in my early 20s regarding my buddy. He actually owns a law firm downtown Chicago. He had a place downtown, and I would write skits as characters, and I would call his cell phone. Not his cell phone, I'm sorry, his landline when I knew he was at work, and I would leave these crazy messages, all our favorite different characters from movies. I'd even sing songs and all this crazy shit. And he would have parties at his place, and I guess, I didn't know this, he was saving them. And I just did this out of a fluke, and then they started having parties, and they would play all these different impersonations through the party, and they would go crazy and laugh and drink, and I would be impersonating people like our buddies from high school, all these different people we knew, parents, and I would set up all these situations, or like it was an emergency or this and that, kind of like what were those Jerky Boys kind of were doing that came out later. And believe me, I'm not the first to do prank calls or any of this shit. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But I started with that, and then I wanted to write. I want to make my own film about the underground world of gambling in Chicago. So my buddy just said, shut the fuck up and do it. He says, me and you'll do it. Which was funny is he ended up becoming a religious freak, and kind of, I wrote it with me and him. It's like a mockumentary film. And I wrote it, and I just wrote it on paper. I didn't know anything about how to write a script correctly or any of that. I was just an obsessed filmmaker. I can't believe the passion and all this shit I used to go through to create this. But and that would be, even when I made the film, I used to have to fax people their lines or tell them over the phone what their lines are. We'd have to write them down and all these things. So I wrote my first screenplay just on notebook paper. And I actually made a full feature 2-hour and 20-minute film out of this. It's too long, but I did it. And I kind of just did it casually. And this is what I'm going to kind of get in with you if you want to start learning how to write. I don't care if it's screenplays or a book or whatever you want to write, create a blog or whatever. So from there, my cousin or my godmother's actually a screenwriting teacher. So I still didn't have final draft, I think, at that point in time. This is like for my second film, I'm in like early 2001. And I think eventually I did get it, but then I started just typing it up on a computer, my scripts. I didn't know still the correct way to how to, fade in and cut to and end, just all the different things, the dialogue. When it came to writing a script, no one taught me. So again, I just started to write it. And the thing I think what scares a lot of people is when it comes to writing scripts, books or anything, they just think it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be forever. And it's got to have this, it's got to be this, it's got to sound this way. And it's, they don't want to, I think they're afraid of being embarrassed that people are going to say they suck. But like I say, what is your why regarding writing? All right, if you figure out your why, and I don't care if you say, hey, I want to write a screenplay or a book because I want to sell it for tons of money, and then I want to become famous, and then I want to do this and I want to become this, don't be embarrassed to say it or believe it. You also may say, hey, I just want to write a book because it's been a monkey on my back and I just want to write about my perception on fitness, or I have a romance novel idea, or I have this. Here's the deal. What is going to make you keep writing, and what's going to help you complete that project? A lot of people are great at starting things, but what is truly going to make you finish it? What's going to make you go the full distance? Right? Because a lot of times I think at the beginning, it's all fun. It's like, what happens too, we start off strong and then we kind of wither away. We get distracted, or we're like, hey, wait a minute, I want it to be this long, but now I think that's too long. I want it to be this way. Now it's not going that way, or I let some people read it. They didn't get it. Whatever the case may be. But if you want to write, and I talked about this either in a video or a podcast at the beginning, sit down for a month, or whenever your free time is, and just when you feel inspired, or even if you're not, whatever, just write. Let it flow out of you. And if you're not in the mood to write, obviously you can use a voice memo on your iPhone or your Android or whatever. Just talk into it. Some days you may be able to write, you may be in the mood to write or type, and then other days you may want to speak. I didn't do that. I was always typing. And I am not really, my vocabulary is very limited. I'm not really, I'm not a great writer by any means. I'm just not. But I always was pretty good at getting my ideas out there and talking to people. And I wish I would have did more vocal things, because I think I would have got things done a lot quicker, and also maybe even hiring people to help me type a lot of my things up, because I was traveling. So if I didn't have time to type, I wouldn't get any material completed. So that's something to think about as well. But before I even wrote 2 books, I wrote 2 more feature films besides the 2 I made. I co-produced the 3rd actually, but I didn't have anything to do writing that. But I wrote 2 more features and 2 pilots for like a sitcom type situation. I started to become obsessed with writing, and things just kept flowing out of me. I just want to get all these things out, all this comedic stuff I want to get out, all these other things regarding my family and one-liners I heard, and I become obsessed with it. But I realized what the one thing is I liked pairing up with people, so I teamed up writing a screenplay called Caught on Film, which originally it was film students that I optioned to the Blair Witch guys, which were the coolest guys ever. I knew those guys. And then I wrote a comedy called Greaseballs about a dysfunctional Italian family that runs the hottest restaurant in Chicago. I worked on raising funding and everything for that for years. And then I wrote 2 pilots, The Has-Been and The D&D Factory, both kind of loosely based on my life. The Has-Been was more or less about me in Chicago trying to make films, but then I incorporated, kind of like a Billy Crystal going back to Saturday Night Live, I incorporated that kind of concept, him coming back to Second City. And the D&D Factory was a bit about me and my kids, a crazy lifestyle living in Orlando, Florida. It's just a different lifestyle living in Orlando, being in the number 1, tourist capital of the world. So I wrote a pilot based on that, and I had other pitches too. But the stuff just flows out of me. And I think you'd be shocked, once you start building momentum, things will start flowing out of you. You really just got to take the first few steps. And a lot of times too, and I know a lot of people want to start one project, and they're like, whatever you start, you got to complete bullshit. Maybe it's because I have ADD. I don't know what I have, but don't get caught up. So if you want to write a romance novel and you start it and you kind of find yourself like, whatever, you write a chapter, you're just writing your ideas. You're like, man, I got a sci-fi idea that's going to blow people away. Go write it down. Just go in another direction. Just let everything keep flowing out of you. Most likely, you could go on forever, but if you have great ideas, go after them. You may shift. I was doing Caught on Film, which is a psychological thriller about 3 film students getting caught in one of the highest crime-ridden areas in the United States. At the same time, I'm doing a comedy. And I needed the break, because I already did 2 or 3 films that were very violent, and I just wanted to laugh. But I loved going kind of back and forth, and you may want to think about doing that as well, keeping your mind, your options open, and also don't always get caught up with, when you think about writing a book or writing a screenplay or writing a blog, whatever it is. Just sit down and just write things. Don't worry about, like, everybody gets caught up in, is it spelled correctly? Is it, is it this way? Is it that way? Am I covering it perfectly? Should it look this way? You get caught up in all that. Just let it get out of you. Worry about all that later. Get your voice and your whatever it is inside of you on paper, or like I said, record it. Worry about all that shit later. You could critique it later. You could trim the fat later. And most likely you're going to have an editor help you do these things. So don't worry about if people made fun of you with your spelling, or you were a horrible student in journalism or in English class. Don't worry about all that bullshit. Most people aren't that great either, I could assure you, most authors and stuff. These aren't always the most brilliant people in the world, but what they are brilliant at a lot of times is their opinions and what they know. And a lot of times they have help getting that voice out there. And that's the other thing. When you're writing, make sure it's in your voice. So when I did my first book, which I'll tell you, the Model Bible, so if we're going to talk about books now, I didn't even mean to write a book. If I was going to do a book, I was going to actually do it on a bio on my life of growing up in the nightclub industry and all the crazy shit I went through my entire life. And that would have been the only thing I really was ever considering doing a bio. Because people used to say, like they do with everybody, man, you have the craziest life, you should write it and make it into a movie. And I say, I don't feel like making my life story into a movie. I don't know, I never was into my own, even though now more and more people are saying it, and even a biography. But I was going to open a modeling agency in LA. I was living in San Diego at the time. And I actually grew up in the fashion industry. And then I modeled when I was younger. And then as time went on, I even, years later, my daughter wanted to model. And then I started doing consulting for some of the modeling schools, agencies, and all these different things. And I noticed a lot of parents and a lot of young people were being taken advantage of in the industry. So I wanted to open a really legit modeling agency. Not only to be around beautiful women, but which is wonderful, but I also was hanging out with a lot of different designers and models as well in California. So this was something I thought about doing. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give an outline on how I want my company to be ran from top to bottom regarding this agency. And I still wouldn't mind opening a modeling agency, actually. But when I originally did this, I just wrote it down, and it ended up being big. And I wanted to go through everything from top to bottom. I wanted it to be ran because I wasn't going to be there. I was traveling a ton, which I still travel. So I was going to be there. I wanted to put some people I knew that knew how to handle it, but I wanted an outline of how this business was going to be ran, and it's going to be ran legitimately. I didn't even care, truthfully, if it succeeded. I didn't want anyone being taken advantage of. No bullshit. So I wrote this huge outline, which was pretty damn big. First, I thought it was only going to be like 8-10 pages. Before you know it, I don't even know how long, 30-40 pages. And then it just came to the point where I realized I just don't have time to open this agency. So I don't know, maybe somebody said to me, Rich, you should just make this into a book. And I was like, that's crazy. There's just too much to cover in a book. And then I went back and started looking at some of the modeling books. And they were either outdated, or they were just like either by models that already made it, which I understand you kind of want to emulate, follow people that succeeded. But a lot of these models were outdated as well. They were too old. They weren't even about the times. Like, a lot of these, I don't care if it's Heidi Klum, Tyra Banks, all these different people, or, those type of people, or it's based on those people. So I said, I want to make the Model Bible, which is just to cut and dry what the industry is about, and also not only to help young females break into the industry, also protect them and their parents. That's what it really was about, the Model Bible. So I worked on it and kept working on it my free time again, and then researched in free time, and then I made my own book. Or actually, at this point, I didn't know I needed a professional editor. Someone referred somebody, and out of a fluke, they were English, but they lived in Italy, and I'm Italian. And out of a fluke, they knew a lot about the fashion world, which was amazing. So it took me, after I thought I was done with it, I was nowhere near. I went back and forth with her for a year, I think. She kept critiquing it in the best way, like putting me against the wall, saying, Rich, this doesn't make sense. You're being repetitive here. Why did you say this? I don't understand this. Shouldn't you have added this? It was amazing. It was literally like I was dancing. And she never lost my voice. And that's the thing you got to realize, too. You have a voice. If you're going to have an editor, make sure they don't make it sound like a Google Doc. Okay, or something that is going to bore people. You want you bleeding out of this thing, right? That's what you need to do. After my first book, and I got a lot of unbelievable reviews on that book, and it did okay. I don't even know what I sold. I don't care. That's the other thing. I didn't create a book for to do monstrous sales. It's only an ebook. I didn't even get the book to do it on a hard copy, but I ended up being accepted. It went in, obviously, Nook, Apple, Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, all of them carry my book, which was awesome online. So then I decided to do another book called Wingman. It's a must-have guide to helping men find basically the woman of their dreams. And I'm creating a program now based on that called Mastering Self-Confidence, the blueprint to helping men find the woman of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. But I don't know why I tackled another book. I was exhausted from screenplays. I know I didn't want to do that. And I travel a lot and I fly. And I just was going to do an Italian cookbook based on my mom, but she wasn't giving me the recipes, quick enough. And she's always fighting with me and arguing with me, which was fine. That's hysterical. But I just said, yeah, I see more and more dudes, like they just kept coming up to me. And I started this like consulting thing. And they kept asking me more about fashion advice, fitness, hygiene, and really women in general. They see me around a lot of beautiful women. And I'm not saying that I'm with tons of beautiful women. I'm just saying I was around them and wanting to know how to do it or how to do that. And they didn't realize a lot of it is their personality. But a lot of them don't want to be around a lot of beautiful women because they're either intimidated or they don't know how to hold themselves, hold their own around them, or they get jealous even if they do date them. So there's all these different things. But I wanted create a book called Wingman, where I'm kind of helping guys through this process. But it's not just, I can't stand pickup artist type things. That's not my style. This is totally kind of the opposite. It's about taking things very slow with women and building friendships first, but not being involved in being caught in the friend zone, but you figuring out who they are before you either, end up in a relationship or sleeping with them or all these things. You kind of just take your time, very slow, and you meet different women, and I have all these different ways of doing that, and networking. It's kind of the turtle in the race, I call it. You're not the rabbit. I'm not the guy who wants to, and in my book, you can use a lot of the tactics to get one-night stands or even get double-teamed by women, all these different things. I get into that in the book, I'm not going to lie, even including how to get involved with porn stars if that's something you're interested in, and all these different things. Regarding that. But again, I let it all flow out of me. And how I did the second book was kind of more on an airplane. I remember I was getting on an airplane and I said, okay, it's January. I think it was January 1st, whatever year it was. It's probably 4 years ago, whatever. I was with my cousin and his kids. We're going to Chicago or coming back, either one or the other. And I said, okay, today's the day. And hopefully in a year I'll have the template done. And I'm only going to really do this when I'm on the airplanes for the most part. And that's what I did. I usually wrote when I was on the planes. I never got internet, so I blocked myself out of that and I would just write. Or I would, that's all I did was write for that book. And I was very fortunate to have the discipline to do that. And that may be something you want to think about too. Sometimes when you're writing, write when you feel like it's all flowing out of you. I think a lot of times two things happen. One is you're like, I got to be inspired to write. So, whenever I feel it, that's when I'm going to write. A lot of times, when are you going to really be in the mood to write? A lot of times you're tired or not. Or you set a certain time. You're like, okay, when my kids aren't here in the morning from 9 to 11, or I'm going to do in the morning, or I'm going to do when they go to bed, 10 to midnight is the only times I'm going to write. You don't know what frame of mind you're in these type of situations. You need to write when you feel inspired. Some days you may feel like staying up late and writing. Some days you may get up early in the morning to write. Sometimes you may be even sitting at the hospital waiting, for a checkup. You could be at a dentist. You could be at the DMV. Whatever. Write. If you feel it coming, just keep it flowing out of you. You could be at Starbucks. You could sit on your phone and just start typing away. We have access to do that, but just keep working at it. And going back to the why do you want to do this? I did it because I want to help people. And I felt like if I didn't do this, I wasn't helping people. That was my why. Still is my why. That's why I created a podcast. That's why I'm creating these programs. I like helping people, regardless if I'm going to get paid doing it or not. That's what I like to do. Does that make me better than anyone else? I don't think so, because the truth is a lot of times I only like helping people with what I only know. I'm not really good at helping people at other things. I'm not saying I'm selfish, but I'm not the guy who's going to help you fix your car. I mean, of course, I'll help family members and friends if you're moving or something that I can help you with. But my point being is I'm not really the type of guy who's always going to be there for people regarding all their needs, I guess, to a certain degree. But if I can help you with what I know how to help you with, I love helping people do that, if that kind of makes sense. So that's what I have to say about that. Again, if you want to start writing books, don't be intimidated, or screenplays or blogs or doing anything. The one thing I would recommend, and you don't have to listen to me, is not jumping on a negative tip, especially on blogging, social media, any of that shit. For me, I just think it just doesn't work for me. And I would, if I was anyone, I'd stay away from that. Whatever you're going to write, for the most part, doesn't always have to be positive. Most of the things I wrote about, especially my screenplays, were very violent. I don't know why I had anger issues or whatever at that point in time, but it all flowed out of me, and it's almost like I got rid of that. It was like baggage in my brain, like all these different scripts and violence and things I wanted to see on, or said. I got rid of those, so that's one good thing. But when it comes to, if you do create your book or screenplay or anything, when you start marketing it or start trying to sell it or whatever you want to do with your writing or blogging, just try to be a little thick-skinned. A lot of family members and friends and colleagues are going to say everything's great always, and then you may get hammered from other people. It could be publishing companies, and obviously other studios you're going to probably get rejected constantly. So like I like to say is, when you hear no, you say next. So this is just a piece of paper, and they are ideas a lot of times. Or if you're on a computer, don't take everything you do and what you write so seriously. That's just my opinion, and obviously I'm not a scientist or somebody on that level coming up with formulas. Those guys are geniuses, and obviously they take their craft a little more seriously. I'm mainly talking about books for entertainment or for learning purposes, same with screenplays, things of that nature. Remember, it is for people to read and enjoy, and the average person only reads one book a year, I think. They see a lot more movies, so if you think about it, just kind of figure out whatever works best for you. All right. I hope this made some sense to you. But again, thanks for joining in or listening in on the Rich CELENZA show. WTF are you talking about? Take care.